please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Hello, I'm Nancy Hungerford, and I'm here at the Singapore Summit to meet an executive who gave up running one of the world's largest oil and gas firms, saying that he needed a lifestyle change. So what is Peter Voser doing now? We find out on the CNBC Conversation. He was stepping down. His legacy was clear, though. He left Shell in a much better place. 2 years later, Peter Voser returned to work, this time as the chairman of ABB, the Swedish-Swiss engineering group. Peter, thank you for joining us on the CNBC Conversation.
Pleasure.
You really have had a front seat witnessing the evolution of energy after nearly 3 decades at Shell, now in your position as chairman at ABB. Let's start first on the oil price environment. When you did step down from Shell at the end of 2013, did you ever see oil going this low for this long?
I think oil is a cyclical business, so it goes up and down. When I became CEO, it went down to 35, but it came back much faster. I think this time it surprised us all a little bit how long it actually stays low as it is now, and that has to do with the shale effect. So the shale effect is a different effect to the price volatilities which we had to deal with in the past, because it is quite clearly there was a lot of volume was added, and to produce a barrel in shale oil, the prices were coming down very fast, obviously driven by the fact that OPEC, for example, wanted to bring prices down in order to move shale oil a little bit out of the picture. And they adjusted their cost structures in a very, very good way. And hence, that's why we have $45 to $55 oil price.
And that shale effect has surprised many. I think at one point you said one of your big regrets during your time at Shell was the investment into shale. Do you still feel that way, given the course that it's taken?
I think it's a good investment, but we were late. I think all the big majors actually were late because we had too many other projects where we could use our competitive advantage, which is really technology. It's project knowledge, having the financials to do 10, 20, $30 billion of projects. We came in late, therefore it was a catch-up exercise for us, and therefore you're always behind what's really going on. And yes, in a way a regret, but I think it's now starting to pay off, which is good.
Looking at shale where we are today, Jim Chanos, who is an infamous short seller, told CNBC recently that he thinks some of these shale producers are on the road to ruin. That caught some by surprise. He was calling into question their accounting methods. Do you think there is anything to that?
I'm not going to comment on accounting methods, but I think the shale boom clearly benefited from the overall financial situation of the world. We were flooded with money, no interest or low interest rates, and that allowed them actually to do quite a bit of leveraged development of their business. And that's, I think, is anywhere between $15 and $20 per barrel, which that cheap financing actually makes, and therefore they have benefited from that. On the other side, let's just be clear. The way they have driven the costs down, the way they have improved safety is quite remarkable. So it's not all kind of negative. They have done a good business job at the end as well, but they benefited from a very loose monetary environment.
So should investors worry?
I wouldn't say worried, but I think also you will not see the shale boom for the next 40 years. Because it's a much shorter business cycle. The wells produce for a much shorter period, and hence I think we are getting closer to the peak most probably. It will still be with us for a while. They will influence prices quite clearly, but I think some of the high yield wells which we have seen now over the last 1-2 years, they're getting to the top end of their production life, and I guess somewhere in the early 20s we will see some reduction in the shale side, on the shale side.
You touched on the role that OPEC is playing. Do you think OPEC is losing its relevance?
I think some of it, yes, but at the end they're still producing 70-75% of the oil consumption, or of the oil, which I think oil will still go slightly up, even with all the new kind of changes which we see, renewable energies, electric cars, etc. I think there's any prediction out there between 10 and 15%. So we'll go slightly up. It will then actually peak at one stage. but the OPEC influence is still there. Shale has played or is still playing a role, but I think it's the two in combination which will set the prices and which will also set the price volatility in the longer term.
What does the price environment mean for the oil and gas business at ABB? Because you supply the sector in a number of ways. How difficult is it making business?
Yeah, we have seen over the last 2-3 years that there were just not sufficient investments made in larger projects, being it on the onshore and also on the offshore. Now, our exposure at ABB is roughly 10% of our revenues, and orders are in the oil and gas and the mining, because the other commodities also suffered. And therefore, we had to do our homework, take costs out, and get more digitalized in that business as well. Now we are ready. We are seeing some pickup now, and I would assume if prices start to stabilize at a certain level, and most oil majors are now cash break even or positive around the current oil prices, that will actually trigger projects again, and then we are ready. Our business is more geared towards offshore. And offshore has just had longer now because it needs higher oil prices or it needs lower costs to actually be profitable. Now we see some of that coming back now.
Still ahead on the conversation with Peter Voser, why he's telling regulators to embrace, not to fight, the rise of the robots.
Every robot needs to be programmed, needs to be built, needs to be supervised. This will generate new jobs as well.
Now, because energy efficiency is a big part of ABB's business, do you think that regulators have done enough in incentivizing corporates to become more energy efficient?
I think there's enough incentives there, and also there was enough money put into the market that it can be developed. I think it's solar and wind, we are now getting there. There are some tax schemes which are still around, and they are helpful for the investments. So I think the market is now mature enough to actually drive this on its own. So I think that works very well. That's on the power generation, transportation and distribution. I think on the car side or on the transport side, so buses, I think more can be done there. Because there we need vast networks of charging stations now. We need infrastructure investments for the buses to be charged at various points when they drive around cities. I think that's where the right incentives in form of regulations could actually kickstart it even more.
So are you ultimately encouraged by the comments we hear coming now from France and the UK talking about eventually phasing out the combustible engine altogether?
I think at the end, it should not be the politicians who dictate which technology will win. I think the market will do that. Climate change elements which are discussed, so COP21, the train has left the stations. Society will demand it.
Speaking of COP21, when you heard the news that President Trump was going to withdraw from the US commitments to COP21, what was your reaction?
In my opinion, a shame, and one of the biggest economy should actually support the climate change battle. On the other side, the train has left the station. We're all working on it. All other governments are supportive, and the big governments as well, with quite a bit of CO2 levels, like China, like India. So they're all supportive. We will develop this. And I'm quite hopeful that over time the US will get back in. If I talk to my colleagues in the big US companies, they're actually all in line with the climate change agenda, and they want to operate outside the US as well. So they will be part of the solution. So I'm quite hopeful that over time we will get to the right solutions, including the US as part of it and not standing outside.
China is trying to lead in some ways when it comes to the electric car push too that we were just discussing. How big is that transformation to electric cars as an opportunity for ABB?
It is a huge opportunity because we are on the power side. So we bring the power through our very unique high voltage direct current technology into the cities. We have our direct current technologies, which brings it to the consumer. We are in the charging station business for both cars for bosses. So we are in the middle of this, and we see this as a big business opportunity to work with the smart cities of the future to actually provide this to our customers. On the other side, we're also working with car manufacturers, because quite clearly they need our robots, they need our automation capabilities, that they can switch them from one model to the next model in a much faster way. So we can work with them as well and get actually quite a lot of business opportunities on both sides.
Going back to, if you were sitting back as Shell CEO, would you be worried?
No, I would see it as an opportunity. As you know, Shell is one of the major companies very active in gas. I said before, renewables is intermittent, needs some help. Gas is the ideal partner. Business models will evolve. Companies like Shell, like other majors, have shown in the past that they are at home in big technology developments, and I think they will transform themselves as well. This is an opportunity.
Technologies have to be affordable in the area of robotics as well. As you know, a big discussion underway here about innovation, automation, and AI. And a bit of debate going on within corporations, I think, as to whether or not this presents a real opportunity or a risk, considering the jobs that are going to be lost here. Obviously, at ABB, you are playing a big role in pushing forward automation. But what is your message to those who still worry that this is a real risk to jobs?
I think in any technology revolutions, we had those fears. I think what's different this time, it comes faster, and hence we may not be able at the end to generate the new jobs sufficiently early so that we don't have to deal with the issue that we have a lot of people without jobs in their old type of fields. But I think here again, the partnership is very important. We need to redesign our education systems. Vocational training, for example. I'm coming out of a country where this is just daily business. We all come out of that. 70% of our population is vocationally trained. And I think that needs to go around the world now. So I'm positive. This is an opportunity. The glass is half full and not half empty.
There is a great deal of nervousness, though, about this transition to robotics. Elon Musk, even an innovator himself, I think at one point said AI was as scary as the threat coming from North Korea. What do you think when you hear those kind of warnings?
I think we have to deal with this one, but we don't need regulation at this stage. I think we have a few decades ahead of us to actually develop that, get the robots to be more efficient, because they are still not very efficient. So let's use AI. Let's use the machine learning, and over time we will see where it goes. It's in our hands as humans, it's in our hands as governments. So I think regulations will be needed, but for me the population is vocationally trained, and I think that needs to go around the world now. So I'm positive. This is an opportunity. The glass is half full and not half empty.
There is a great deal of nervousness, though, about this transition to robotics. Elon Musk, even an innovator himself, I think at one point said AI was as scary as the threat coming from North Korea. What do you think when you hear those kind of warnings?
I think we have to deal with this one, but we don't need regulation at this stage. I think we have a few decades ahead of us to actually develop that, get the robots to be more efficient, because they are still not very efficient. So let's use AI, let's use the machine learning, and over time we will see where it goes. It's in our hands as humans, it's in our hands as governments. So I think regulations will be needed, but for me this is a few decades away, and something like this should not stop the evolution of technology.
So it's too early for regulations?
It's too early for that, yeah.
One of the impediments, perhaps, so when you talk about all that data that is available with these processes, is the fear of hacking, the cybersecurity threat. If you have a connected home, many say, wait a minute, am I then exposed?
Yeah, cybersecurity is a real issue. We are all exposed to it. At ABB, we are twice exposed. We are exposed as a company internally. On the other side, we sell so many products, therefore we have to take care of our customers as well, which is your home example. You cannot eliminate this completely. I think, again, it is the way private and public partnership works to actually attack these things, to make sure that our technologies actually can cover this over time. So there's a lot to be done here. We are only at the beginning, but this is a threat which we have to take very seriously, and we have to work on that.
We will have much more with our conversation with Peter Voser when we return.
I just felt it. I also felt I need some more private time, because these jobs, like the CEO of Shell or other companies, this is 24/7, 365.
Gitanjali's robust distribution model that aims to tap in the potential partners for their distribution and retail business. Watch the making of a jeweler distribution at these times.
Presented by leading jewelers of the world.
Step beyond the millions and understand the secrets of money that will change your financial life. And learn how to get money, how to keep money, and how to grow money. CNBC TV18 presents Die Poor or Live Rich by Snehadeep Fulzile. SMS CD Rich to 51818 or mail us at cd@network18online.com. Order your copy today.
Hello and welcome to CNBC TV18 Weekender. Joining us is a fashion designer who is also a philanthropist. She has lots of achievements under her belt.
Hi, this is Mahika Meerpuri. Watch me on CNBC TV18 Weekender.
Class. Speed. Raw power. Max torque. Get ready for an unmatched automotive experience. Servo presents Overdrive.
Overdrive, presented by Servo, world-class lubricants from Indian Oil.
Pisa in Italy is famous for its Leaning Tower, of course, but recently it also became the venue for a classical collaboration like no other, when Andrea Bocelli sang Verdi, accompanied by an orchestra conducted by Yumi the Robot. Yes, ABB's two-armed machine, which is usually at home on the factory floor, was taught to mimic conducting maestro Andrea Colombini. Sure, it was a set piece, and Yumi likely wouldn't be able to improvise, so maybe for now it is just a semi-conductor. When we're talking about the next industrial revolution, I have to bring up your robot that recently conducted an opera. When we talk about the threat out there of job losses, many wonder which jobs are most at risk. If a robot can conduct an opera that Andrea Bocelli is performing in, is anyone safe?
Yes, indeed. Got a lot of publicity on this one. It was, I think, a good experience for us as well. The robot had to work 17 hours to really see how you conduct this, and had to watch the conductor how to do this. I think it is pretty clear which jobs at the moment are affected. And it's the first time in our history that it is not blue collars only, it is white collars as well this time. So any back office area is affected, any process automation or processes are, manufacturing processes are affected, etc. I think we don't know yet what a robot can do in the longer term, where it can be actually used. We will work on that, but every robot needs to be programmed, needs to be built, needs to be supervised. This will generate new jobs as well. So that's why I say the glass is half full. It's actually not half empty.
What did the conductor think? Did he think the robot did a fair job replicating his skills?
I think yes, but on the other side, he can also say it cannot improvise yet. So the AI is not as far as advanced yet that a robot can improvise. And a conductor brings in his special style, and he may not conduct every day the same way, which is the richness of the music as well. A robot will just do it every day the same way, because that's what we want. So we want exactly the efficiency of a robot. We want to have it used for work where safety maybe plays a big role, maybe where the work is very dirty, etc. And that's where we use them, and that's where a great benefit is there. On the other side, like conducting like feeling the music, etc. We are maybe a little bit further away.
You've worked throughout your career in industries that require free cross-border trade. It would be rather antagonistic, you might think, to protectionist measures of any sort. Following the election seasons of 2016, we had the Brexit shock, some of the rhetoric in the US election too, leading in a protectionist way. Do you think there's still a concern here among business leaders that globalization is at risk?
I think concerns are there. I wouldn't describe it that globalization is at risk, but I think that the development of the globalizations may not be as clear as it used to be. But I think, and when I talk to people, it's very clear globalization had great benefits. It's lifting poor people out of poverty into the middle class, and we have seen that. We have the numbers, etc. So I think this will continue. Does it maybe need some fine-tuning here and there? Yes. I don't think actually the big issue is the globalization or the trade issues with the US. It is actually much more that within the US, infrastructure, education systems, etc., have not been developed over the last few decades, and that's the people feel. I don't think it's actually a consequence of globalization. It is a consequence of not having done the right thing inside the US. I think that's hopefully being addressed. I think the rest of the world will see different leadership leaders for the drive of globalization. This will not go away. It is more nationalistic thinking in everything, but I think we can adapt to that and still take the full benefit of globalization.
You touch on the US there. There is great optimism that some infrastructure stimulus will get through, some tax reform will get through. If it doesn't, will that be a disappointment, not just for the US markets, but globally, considering the ripple effects?
I think in terms of investments on infrastructure, etc., that will be a disappointment if that doesn't come. And I think it's a twofold disappointment. It's a disappointment for the people in the US because they need it. But it's also a disappointment for companies like ABB because we could deliver a lot of products and goods which would help the US. The tax reform, I think it is needed. I'm pro-tax reform, but I think it's the weight which is attached to it, of what it actually will change on a worldwide basis, I think it's a little bit overplayed. So if ABB wants to put a manufacturing plant into the US, we don't do this for taxes. We do this because the market is there, we have the right people, we have the right R&D, so the right people skills, we have the right R&D, and we want to be locally embedded. And then taxes will then also be a part of that thinking, but it's not the prime driver. So I think it's more an issue of the US companies than it is most probably for the rest of the world.
Do you do it if you get a phone call from US President Trump saying, move here and I'll give you some favorable terms?
We will take that into account, but we are producing more than 60% of our sales in the US, we produce in the US. This was always our philosophy. So if he calls me, I will actually tell him, I do that already, thank you very much. I still take your tax reform, but we will just continue.
I just want to end more on a personal note, really looking back at your career. When you made the transition from Shell, deciding to leave Shell, citing personal reasons, how did you know it was time to go?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. How do you know this? You don't wake up one morning and think that's it now. I think it takes quite some time, but I really felt that it is now the time that I also can give something back. So I always divide the life in 3 phases. Young, you do everything you shouldn't do, but you do it because it's fun. You study, then you work professionally, and then there comes the give back time. And I just felt I'm getting now to that stage where this becomes for me more important than be successful in the day-to-day business on an ongoing basis. And I just felt it. I also felt I need some more private time, because these jobs like a CEO of Shell or other companies, this is 24/7, 365. And I just felt now it's okay. Now I'm working in a few NGOs, working for women in leadership positions with students, and having fun to do something else and giving something back. And I just felt so slowly I was getting to that point.
In conclusion, is there anything you would like to share about your time in the industry, both in the oil and gas sector, now overall in the energy business?
I'm very proud and happy to have been part of the energy revolution over the last few decades. It's a fascinating industry, and we see it. It's changing every day now. There are a few things the world needs to get right, and energy is one of them, including energy efficiency. I like technology. I like building big stuff, so this was the right industry for me. And each time when I was on a platform out 100 miles out in the sea, it always was fascinating that these things actually work and that we all built this and had the right technology. So it was a great experience, I have to say.
Would you still take a trip out to a platform just to remember what it's like?
I'll go now. If you have a chopper, let's go.
Peter Voser, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for joining the CNBC Conversation.
Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure as well, Nancy. Thank you.